It's not Wall Street, but the NFL stock market is open, and when we look at all 32 teams' its future, who should we buy and who should we sell? Let's talk. Now, if you're new around here, drop a comment. I get back to every single comment as quickly as I possibly can, so I'd love for you guys to get active down below. But we're going to be active here in the AFC South because it's one of the most exciting divisions, and there was a lot of noise made in the AFC South. We'll kick it off here with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who now have the youngest GM and one of the youngest coaches in the league in James Gladstone and Liam Cohen, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, they made some noise on draft night. Of course, they moved up from 5 to 2, which we didn't know exactly which direction they were going to go, but James Gladstone, the first thing he said when he took over, he was going to make a splash. He was going to be aggressive, and boy was he. He traded away a lot of draft capital, but he got Travis Hunter. Potentially the greatest prospect we've ever seen is now in Jacksonville. So Duval Nation, it should be exciting for you going forward. One, I'm interested to see how much of the two-way ability we get on display in year number one, and if that expands or shrinks going forward. Now, they also got Wyatt Malum. He's had his ups and downs at West Virginia. Not the greatest summer leading up to the draft, but ultimately he was very productive at West Virginia. So Trevor Lawrence keeping him upright is never a bad idea, right? This offseason, they didn't really lose much. They lost some veteran mouthpieces like Christian Kirk, who I love, and Evan Ingram, who's now in Denver. But ultimately, you didn't really lose much. You gained a lot. You didn't really lose any, though. This morning, I will say they released Gabe Davis. That's something to look out for. But again, not losing much. The big question for this team to wrap it up, how can they maximize all of this talent? How can Liam Cohen get Trevor Lawrence to take that next step? And can he get that next step out of Trevor Lawrence? Can he maximize Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter, the receiver, while not trying to, I guess, go one way or the other? How can we maximize both these guys on a weekly basis to, again, maximize the ceiling of this offense and this group going forward? If Liam Cohen can do that, I can see this team potentially winning the division next year. So we're going to buy their stock. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers, of course, they are one of the most decorated franchises in the NFL. They had an interesting offseason because they lost basically their entire offense from last season. They lost two quarterbacks, their starting running back Najee Harris. They just traded away George Pickens for a third and a late round pick to Dallas. And they also lost one of their starting tackles in Dan Moore. Granted, Dan Moore wasn't great, but still, you lost a starting piece. So this Pittsburgh offense is seemingly night and day difference as far as what is going to be out on the field. And honestly, we don't even know yet what the quarterback is going to be or who the quarterback is going to be for this unit in 2025. In the draft, though, they dominated. I love their draft. They got Derek Harmon at the end of the first round, followed it up with Caleb Johnson to replace Najee Harris. He's out of Iowa. He's used to tough, hard-nosed running, and he could be a bell cow for Pittsburgh, which is typically what Pittsburgh likes to do, is have a bell cow running back. Caleb Johnson's going to be able to do that from day number one. And you also took a shot on Will Howard late. I'm a higher fan on Will Howard than most out there. He was a top five quarterback for me in this draft process. So if Pittsburgh, which they've always been able to do, is develop talent, if they can develop Will Howard, who knows? Maybe this isn't such of a bad offseason for this offensive side of the ball if Will Howard can be good from day number one. They did trade for DK Metcalf this offseason. Potentially, that was the move to entice Aaron Rodgers, because that's my big question. What is he doing? Is he signing? Obviously, I think Pittsburgh, with the quarterback room that they currently have, which is Mason Rudolph, Skylar Thompson, and Will Howard, I think they know something we don't already. I think Aaron Rodgers is probably just on one of his retreats. I think after a couple days here, he's going to end up a Pittsburgh Steeler. But ultimately, when I look at this team, do I think Aaron Rodgers can, I guess, take this team to the next level? Do I think that with losing George Pickens, this team can be better offensively and make a Super Bowl run this year, next year, the year after? Ultimately, no. I think they're always going to be good, far from great. So for that reason, even though they're 500, I'm going to sell their stock. Now, my favorite team, of course, I have no room to talk about how bad other franchises are because, well, I'm a Browns fan. But we did have a great draft, I'll say that. Mason Graham at the top of it after getting multiple draft pieces going forward. I like that, especially if Travis was not planning to be here long term. Mason Graham's used to the cold weather, he's used to the Midwest, so being a key piece on the D line next to Myles Garrett, it's going to be crucial in a division that has a lot of teams that like to run the football, with Pittsburgh and Baltimore headlining that, of course. Carson Schwarzenegger, of course, to open up the second round. Very talented linebacker, man. I think he's only had one full year at starting linebacker for UCLA, transferred over from the safety position, but he dominated last year, man. Tackling machine, great in coverage. He's going to be our Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah replacement, because we don't know if he's going to play football again with that neck injury that JOK does have. Quinshon Judkins, it's an okay pick. We also drafted Dylan Sampson late. Again, it was an okay pick. Not too big of a fan of either. And we also, we were, again, the headline of this draft because we were made fun of. Not, shown grace because of the great trade that we have early on, but because we drafted two different quarterbacks. We drafted Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, who Shedeur Sanders already seems to be a fan favorite in the city. All the teams are supporting Shedeur Sanders, and they want him to start. And I don't blame him. I honestly think Shedeur should be the starting quarterback of this team after about week 6 to 8, right? But the Cleveland Browns, Cavaliers, by the way, down 0-2. It's a rough time to be a Cleveland fan. For the Browns, however, we have an interesting quarterback conversation going forward because we still have Watson in the mix, but we also have two Super Bowl winning quarterbacks with two rookies. We're going to have to figure out who gets the playing time and who doesn't. But we did lose Nick Chubb, I'm guessing, this offseason with drafting the running backs, with reconstructing Jerome Ford's contract. I just can't see a point in time at this point that Nick Chubb's going to be back as the Cleveland Browns. So going to a team like Chicago or Minnesota could be a great move for Nick Chubb. I wish him the best because he should have retired a Cleveland Brown. Let's be honest. The big question here, what is the future of Myles Garrett? On this channel, I was a big advocate for trading Myles Garrett this offseason because his value is never going to be higher than what it is right now. And getting a haul back for him, getting multiple early first-round picks with maybe a young player or two would rebolt this rebuild because, well, let's face it, Myles Garrett doesn't want to be here. He's only here because the money was in front of him and he was kind of backed into a corner. So what is the future of Myles Garrett? That's a big question going forward. And can we develop one of these quarterbacks? I doubt it. So for that reason, if I put my fan bias aside, I'm selling stock in the Cleveland Browns. Let's get back on a positive note here because the number one pick in the draft belonged to the Tennessee Titans, who drafted Cameron Ward, a guy who was a journeyman, a former unranked prospect, and he became a number one overall pick. First time in history that's ever been done, and I'm happy that he ended up in Tennessee because last year, this defense was amazing. I think they only had the second most yards allowed per game last year, despite only having 3 wins and the number one overall pick. That goes to show how talented this defensive side is. So to get Cam Ward to hopefully figure out the most important position and to get this offense rolling with an offensive head coach, that could do wonders for Tennessee going forward. I do want to say that Kevin Winston out of Penn State safety is going to be their next Kevin Byard on this back end of this defense. And I'm excited, man. 4-year starter at Penn State, only had 1 missed tackle in his career. Absolutely outstanding for Big Ten football. And also, they drafted some weapons for Cam Ward to go along with Calvin Ridley. Gunnar Helm out of Texas, super talented tight end. His pro comp is probably, let's say, a little lesser version of a George Kittle. So keep that in mind, Tennessee fans. And you also have Alec Eilmanor, who you drafted late there. And I'm excited to see what he can do in this Tennessee offense. Of course, he might need some time to heal up here and recover from some of his injuries at Stanford. But Alec Eilmanor, Gunnar Helm, some of the other options you got in this offense with Cam Ward, I like the direction that the Titans offense is going. The only real piece you lost this offseason was Chidobe Awuzie, so the secondary definitely takes a step back. But overall, I think this defensive unit is solid. You have your hopeful quarterback. I'm overall buying stock in the Tennessee Titans, and I think it's a big year for Brian Callahan to prove himself. Let's stay in the division here with the Houston Texans, and this was requested, so this is why they're on the video. But let me make this one quick and to the point. You lost a lot of key offensive pieces this offseason. You lost Stephon Diggs. You lost 2 of your best offensive linemen, which doesn't make a lot of sense. I get the salary cap reasoning behind it, but you took an offensive line that was bad and made them worse overnight. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But you did go out there and try and help out this wide receiver room, and ultimately CJ Stroud by drafting two Iowa State Cyclones, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, both receivers, and both of them dominated last year as they were one game away from the college football playoff. So with those two guys, Nico Collins, and around week 8 to 10, when you get Tank Dell back, you have a loaded wide receiver room here for CJ Stroud to continue to dominate at the NFL level. My questions for this team is, of course, when do we get Tank Dell back? Because we know when he comes back and he's cleared, he's going to need about a month to ramp up. But also, how much can CJ Stroud elevate these young rookie wide receivers? We've seen him do it before. Can he do it yet again? If they can, I don't see why Houston doesn't win this division yet again. Now, New Orleans is another team that had a new head coach this offseason, and they chose Kellen Moore to be the guy. Of course, it was not a coveted job, as this team is in salary cap. Well, let's just put it frankly, they're in salary cap hell, right? So they have a lot of aging veterans, a lot of tough contracts on their plate, and that's why not a lot of these head coaching candidates wanted the New Orleans job. But Kellen Moore said, whatever, we're going to figure it on the fly, and I'm going to be that great of a coach where I can turn this organization back to where they were about a decade ago. On the offensive side of the ball, they had to address it because right before the draft, Derek Carr has this injury, and he might not play all of 2025. Honestly, I don't think he will. So they went out there and drafted Kelvin Banks, tackle out of Texas, with a top 10 selection. They got Tyler Shuck, who there's mixed opinions on, but they believe in him, and he can do exactly what they need, which is just to be a good high completion quarterback and to move the sticks. That's all they need to do. They also got Jonas Sanker down the board, kind of a safety linebacker mix. He's going to fit nicely on the back end of this defense. Jonas Sanker out of Virginia, love that selection in the later rounds. My question for this team is for Kellen Moore. I get it. You're taking on this challenge of this tough roster, but if these veterans continue to get hurt, you're going to have to make some of these tougher cap decisions, even if some of these guys have been pillars for this organization for close to a decade now. Guys like Ryan Ramczyk, guys like Eric McCoy, two offensive linemen that can't stay healthy. You're going to have to make decisions on them because, well, they got pretty big contracts. You can do a lot. I can bring a lot of players into the mix. Let's just say that. But for the Saints, how can you manage the salary cap situation? Honestly, I don't believe in the quarterback. Kellen Moore, I think, took on a little bit more than he could chew. At least that's what it looks like right now. And with their cap situation, with their aging veterans, I'm going to sell stock in the New Orleans Saints. But don't get me wrong, I want to see him return to excellence. My favorite player of all time is ultimately Drew Brees. Staying in the NFC South, we have the Carolina Panthers, who started off this offseason the right way by paying their players. J.C. Horn got a huge contract extension. Their corner for the future got a bag. So I'm excited for J.C. Horn, right? But in the draft, they made some noise. I think everybody going into it said defense, defense, defense. Well, they said, hey, you're wrong. We're going to take offense and get our quarterback a number one wide receiver. Tedero McMillan, 6'5", big body wide receiver out of Arizona, is the new X receiver in Carolina. So he joins Xavier Legette. He joins some of these other young, talented wide receivers. And oh, by the way, he's also joining Hunter Renfrow, a guy who last year we thought was done with football. Turns out he had a bit of an illness and lost a bunch of weight, but now he's back to playing for him, and it's good to see Hunter Renfrow back on the field. He is just this year's version of Adam Thielen, so excited to see him back in the mix. On the defensive side, they did go out there and get two young edges that have a lot of potential. Guys like Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M. Not the biggest fan of him, to be honest, but the potential is there. I am a big fan of Princely Uman-Mielen out of Ole Miss, so they got two talented edges here to kind of beef up this defensive line. So though they didn't take one in the first round, they still got a lot of talented guys to add to this defensive front with an addition of a 6'5" wide receiver. I like this stock going forward. So I'm going to buy stock in the Carolina Panthers. I think Dave Canales and Bryce Young turn this thing up next year, and they are on the fringe of playoff contention. So I'm going to buy stock in Carolina. To close it off here, we're going to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. Last year, not great, 4-13, last in the AFC West. But this offseason, they decided no more Antonio Pierce. We need to change it up, and boy, did they. They brought in Pete Carroll, who took a year or two off of football. He's now back. Of course, one of the most legendary coaches in NFL history. They traded for Geno Smith from Seattle. So, of course, Pete Carroll, Geno Smith, they have history. It's a perfect fit here in Las Vegas. They also signed a bunch of quality free agents, man. Jeremy Chin, Eric Stokes to beef up the secondary, Raheem Mostert to help out this struggling running back room, and Alex Kappa, who was an all-pro last year, but Cincinnati had to release due to cap reasons. He finds his way to the Raiders to join guys like Jackson Powers Johnson on the interior of that offensive line. So this offense and this defense has changed overnight for the Las Vegas Raiders, but we're not done. On the offensive end, they also drafted what probably should have been the Heisman winner in Ashton Jeanty to command this running back room. Again, this was the worst running back room in the league last year. They get a big addition in Mostert and Ashton Jeanty, and they also drafted the Cooper Kupp of this draft. Jack Beck, savvy, hard work, put your hard hat on kind of a wide receiver. First in, last out, film junkie. You guys get all the stereotypes, but he goes to Las Vegas to join Jacoby Myers and to join Brock Bowers in this receiving room for Las Vegas. This offense just looks so much better than just a year ago, even just a couple months ago, right? The big question for me is, does Pete Carroll still have that juice in him? Does he still have that impact? Can he turn this organization around overnight like Jim Harbaugh did in division with the LA Chargers? I believe he can, but hey, he's up there in age. Maybe he doesn't have the same impact as he does in Seattle. Again, I'm just kind of throwing darts here blindly, but that's the big question. How much can he turn this franchise around in just 1 year? But now, like I said, this isn't Wall Street, but the NFL stock market is something I like to explore every single off season. So if you enjoy, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Episode 278. And of course, don't forget to drop a comment. I'll get back to you as quickly as I possibly can.